Notes towards a poem that can never be written of Margaret Atwood opens abruptly. We get a series of statements about the place. The identity of the place is never revealed. And in fact, critics are divided over the identity of the place. Perhaps the best candidate for the unnamed place, unspecified place, spoken of in the opening lines of the poem is Africa. Africa is a continent like no other, and Africa has a long history of famine. A famine is a widespread food scarcity which results in hunger, starvation, death, malnutrition, disease. It is quite possible that Margaret Atwood has Africa in mind while penning these lines. She declares that this is the place you would rather not know about, sitting in the comfort of Canada, living in one of the most advanced societies in the world. It is very unlikely that you should come to know of Africa and its remote parts. However, she clarifies that this is the place that will inhabit you. We have heard of persons inhabiting places. That is what they always do. But here the poet says that the place will inhabit you. The place will inhabit the person. The place will become your obsession. Once you go to Africa, once you come into contact with Africa, once you come to know about Africa, Africa will inhabit you. It will become your obsession. It is the place you cannot imagine. What happens in Africa is mind-boggling, is beyond the imagination, especially beyond the imagination of a Westerner living in a democratic society, living in an advanced society, enjoying all the freedoms of a democracy, enjoying a very comfortable lifestyle. It is the place, according to the poet, that will ultimately defeat you, that will finally defeat you. Because Africa, large parts of Africa, are most of the time under totalitarian regimes. And these totalitarian regimes ensure that writers, intellectuals are all ultimately defeated. It is a place where the word why shrivels and empties itself. To shrivel means to contract, to become wrinkled, to become worthless. The word why is a word which you can freely use in a democracy. In a democracy, you can freely ask questions. You can utter the word why. But in totalitarian societies of the kind which you frequently come across in large parts of Africa, the word why has no place. It shrivels, it empties itself, it becomes worthless. The opening section of the poem concludes on a striking note. This is famine. Famine is, as I said, widespread scarcity of food, causing hunger, starvation, malnutrition, death, disorder. Famines are very much part of African history. But it could be that the poet has not merely food famine in mind. She is also thinking of other kinds of famine. For example, there is freedom famine, a country where there is widespread lack of freedom, widespread scarcity of freedom. Because in the sections to come, it is this kind of famine that the poet discusses in detail. Famine can operate on several levels, and it could be that the poet has all these levels in mind when she declares this is famine. In the second section of the poem, the poet declares that there is no poem you can write about it. What is this it? She explains that she is thinking of mass graves. When you remove the sand, you find that dozens of people have been buried there. Mass graves. The powers that be put people to death, put persons to death in large numbers, and then buries their bodies. Their skins demonstrate that they were tortured to death. The poet points out that this did not happen last year. This did not happen last year. This did not happen 40 years ago. This happened last week. These lines heighten the topical significance of the poem. The poem is not about something which happened in the dim past, but about something which is happening in the present, which it appears will continue to happen in the future. We make wreaths of adjectives for them. We count them like beads. The poet now makes use of extremely powerful figures of speech, metaphor, simile. A wreath is an arrangement of flowers, of leaves, and perhaps also stems, in the form of a circle, and a wreath is usually laid on a grave or on a coffin. Adjectives are words which name the attributes of nouns, which qualify nouns, which add to the meanings of nouns. We make wreaths of adjectives for them. Whenever there is a mass killing, whenever there is a mass death, everybody who is somebody releases a statement, and the statement is usually a very floral one, full of adjectives. The poet sarcastically declares that we make wreaths of adjectives for them. We count them like beads. As far as the rest of the world is concerned, a mass killing is nothing very important. We count the number of persons dead in a mass death like beads. The image is perhaps that of a child using counting beads or a child using an abacus. The innocent child, unconcerned about what is happening and just counting the beads and then arriving at the number. Similarly, a mass death is insignificant for the rest of the world, and a mass death is nothing but a number arrived at, just as an innocent child arrives at a number using counting beads or an abacus. The poet amplifies on what she has said by observing that we turn them into statistics and litanies and into poems like the present one. There are mass deaths, but these mass deaths are simply unimportant for the rest of the world, and we convert them into statistics. We say that in one particular year so many persons were put to death in such and such a country. Litany. Litany is a prayer, litany is a petition used in church service, usually recited by the clergy, to which the laymen respond in a recurring pattern, in a predetermined formula. We convert mass deaths into statistics and into litanies. We issue appeals to the governments of the countries concerned. We know full well that the appeals will fall on deaf ears. We convert the mass deaths into statistics, into figures, into litanies, and into poems like the present one. A mass death is a wonderful opportunity for a poet to write a poem and become famous and perhaps also earn a little money. Nothing works. The fact is that all these things do not have any impact on the reality in that particular country. Totalitarian societies remain what they are, remain totalitarian societies. If sympathy is feeling for, empathy is feeling with. Empathy is the capacity to identify oneself with others, to project oneself into the positions that others occupy. The secret strength of the present poem is the passionate empathy that the poet feels for the suffering all over the world. Here, the poet, living a very comfortable life, enjoying all the fruits of democracy, living in a very advanced society, materially very secure, enjoying an excellent standard of living, having absolutely no cause to complain as far as her life is concerned, passionately feeling for the suffering people of another country, of another continent. As I said, the fundamental strength of the present poem is the passionate empathy, is the intense empathy that the poet feels for the suffering people of the world.